Welcome everyone to part 2 of our History of Mortal Kombat series, where today we are going to dig into the second era of the MK series as it enters the home console generation and the third dimension. By the time Mortal Kombat Trilogy was released, franchise fatigue had begun to take its toll. So when MK4 released on October 15, 1997, Ed Boon and co. were hoping the series moving to the third dimension would be the boost it needed to capture the public interest again.
The crushing pound of the mallet. The shattering blow of the club.
Mortal Kombat 4 had several arcade versions before making it to home consoles. An early version, called Revision 1, was toured around America to hype the upcoming official release. This version had a very limited roster, and the first version to officially enter arcades, Revision 2, removed Noob Saibot and added Reptile, as well as the new characters Kai, Jarek, and Tanya. This version was then modified to include Johnny Cage and Jax, as well as introduce a new character named Raiko. Sub-Zero was also given a scar and a new second-player costume to closer resemble his Mortal Kombat 3 version.
Sub-Zero wins.
The final arcade version, Revision 3, gave every character a second fatality, fixed some bugs, introduced a few new costumes, and the secret character Meat as an alternate selectable skin. Yeah, Meat's pretty dumb. Babalities and friendships are not included in Mortal Kombat 4, as Ed Boon stated he wanted to move away from the silliness of Mortal Kombat 3, which some fans felt was a little too much. Because, in a series about wizards, ninjas, and Hollywood actors fighting four-armed monsters for control of the world, the last thing you want to be is silly.
Come in, Sonya, this is Jax, are you there?
Mortal Kombat 4 also introduced a new throw move for all characters called Bone Breakers, which had characters perform attacks that broke kneecaps, cracked arms out of place, and even snapped necks, just to have characters awkwardly wiggle their bones back into place and keep on fighting. This was exacerbated by how awful the graphics looked. Granted, this was during that awkward period for home consoles like the PS1 and N64, where developers were still figuring out how to make 3D graphics work, and 2D games were still, for the most part, the best looking games out there. See Castlevania Symphony of the Night for a perfect example. But Mortal Kombat 4 did release after smash hits like Super Mario 64, Final Fantasy VII, and Tekken 3, so good 3D graphics were possible, and consumers knew this as well. So the horrible graphics in MK4 stood out even more. Mortal Kombat 4 also saw the first new final boss to the series in years named Shinnok, a fallen elder god, along with his servant Quan Chi, who looks like if Death from Bill and Ted went through a goth phase.
Excuse us, dude, but your shoes are untied.
Oh.
Weapon combat was a huge push in the game's marketing campaign, and each character had their own unique weapon. Weapons could be drawn with a simple special move command, but the weapons themselves were pretty terrible. They were extremely slow, did good damage, but you could realistically only land a couple of hits in at the most, as any hit would make you drop your own weapon on the ground, which you or your opponent could pick back up again. A new maximum damage system was also introduced, which would activate when a combo did too much damage and flip both characters out of the combo, almost like a prototype of Skullgirl's infinite combo prevention system, and was the only welcome gameplay addition to Mortal Kombat 4.
Major surgery!
The game also had interactable objects and stages that could be thrown that did a lot of damage, some more than most combos. This is also a precursor to the interactable objects from the Injustice series that was eventually brought over into Mortal Kombat X. 2 years later, after its initial release, Mortal Kombat Gold was brought to the Sega Dreamcast, an updated version of Mortal Kombat 4, similar to Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 that came out after the original Mortal Kombat 3 was released. This new version added legacy characters to the roster like Mileena, Baraka, Kung Lao, Cyrax, Sector, and Katana, along with some vastly improved looking cutscenes over the original. This, however, didn't help the overall reception of the game from fans and critics, as the series' first foray into the 3D realm was seen as an overall failure, lacking the fun, mystery, and charm the original 3 titles had.
By defeating you, Sub-Zero, I have avenged the death of my family and clan. Now my soul can finally rest.
It would be 5 years until we heard from the MK series again, as we were thick into the dark age of fighting games that lasted from the release of Street Fighter III Third Strike in 1999 to the release of, ironically, Street Fighter IV in 2008 that resurrected the entire genre. Despite an image of the number 5 with Scorpion's face on it being posted on Ed Boon's website in 1999, the next mainline entry in the series, Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, wouldn't release until 2002, but only on home consoles, officially making Mortal Kombat 4 the last arcade release for the series, as the arcade scene in America had long since died by then.
Army of the long-forgotten Dragon King. And most disturbing of all, formed
originally titled Mortal Kombat Vengeance, hence the V, Deadly Alliance showed a massive graphical leap from Mortal Kombat 4, with this being the first entry in the series in the 6th generation of home consoles on the PS2. Acting as a quasi-reboot of the series that is credited as the first revival of the franchise, Deadly Alliance begins by killing off the series protagonist Liu Kang.
Show of allegiance, they sprung their attack.
Deadly Alliance also drops the run button from previous games, and each character has now 2 unarmed fighting styles and 1 weapon style that can be switched on the fly with the touch of a button. Each weapon style also has a special impale move that, if successful, would lodge the weapon into your opponent and it would stay there, causing damage over time. The different styles could also be comboed into each other, with some characters able to do massive combos switching between all 3 styles. However, special moves for each character were dropped to about 2 to 4 per character, but thankfully they weren't restricted to a specific style. Despite this, the gameplay in Deadly Alliance is vastly improved over the slow and clunky controls of MK4, and along with its vastly improved graphics and character models, Deadly Alliance was a massive success for the franchise. The game did suffer a few drawbacks, however. The fatalities in Deadly Alliance are some of the worst in the entire series, and the game had no stage fatalities for the first time in the series' entire history. However, the game did feature numerous other features to bolster its single-player content. For the first time since MK1, the Test Your Might minigame returns, along with a new Test Your Sight minigame that has you following the MK logo hidden in a cup being shuffled around like a hustler on a New York City street corner.
You chose wisely.
Doing well in these minigames and in battle gets you coins, yes that's with a K, to use in the Crypt, again with a K, appearing in the franchise for the first time. The Crypt in this game has 676 coffins on a 26 by 26 AA to ZZ grid. Each coffin costs a certain amount of a certain type of currency, of which there are 6 to open. Coffins contain items such as concept art, alternate costumes, and even unlockable characters. There are even goofy unlockables like a Cooking with Scorpion video.
Learn about chopping, tenderizing, chopping, cake decorating, and chopping.
And the coffin marked FU contains the most medal reward of all. Conquest also makes its first appearance in MK, although it is a very bare-bones version of what the mode would become in later entries of the series, as it acts as merely an expanded tutorial mode for each character, sprinkling in bits of lore for each character in text segments between each loading screen. From the gameplay side, Deadly Alliance added wall splats, similar to the Tekken series, in which knocking an opponent against the wall will deal extra damage. Also introduced was a power-up mechanic, usually tied to the character's second fighting style, that would increase your damage for a certain amount of time until it ran out or you got hit. This is similar to the rage mechanic in Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe. While interactable objects are present, they are very infrequent and are limited to things like statues that can be broken and damage an opponent standing near it, or standing next to acid-spitting statues in the acid bath stage. The new characters joining the cast this time around are Frost, a female Sub-Zero, Draman, Moloch, Kenshi, Bo' Rai Cho, Hisuhao, Natara, Mavado, Li Mei, and the secret characters Mocap, who is literally just a guy in a motion capture suit, and Blaze, the character you may remember from the background of Mortal Kombat 2. As you might be able to tell, most of these new characters are incredibly lame, as Kenshi and Frost are the only characters liked enough by the fans to return to the series. Okay, yeah, Bo' Rai Cho returns in MKX, but who cares? And if you do, the better question is, why? Seriously. The game sold very well and was reviewed favorably by critics, breathing new life into the franchise, which led the series into its next entry in 2004, Mortal Kombat Deception.
It was not by chance that this struggle came to be. The blame falls squarely upon my shoulders for giving evil the chance it needed, and therefore fulfilling an ancient prophecy. Raiden's Earthrealm champions had failed to stop the Deadly Alliance from fully resurrecting the mummified army of the Dragon King.
Continuing the trend of epic opening cutscenes, Deception sees the Deadly Alliance of Shang Tsung and Quan Chi triumphant against Raiden and his champions, only to have them join forces to combat a greater threat, Onaga, the Dragon King, and former Emperor of Outworld, not to mention the new final boss.
And that ruler had returned. Onaga, former Emperor of Outworld, the Dragon King. The prophecy had been fulfilled. The Dragon King had indeed returned to Outworld to reclaim his army and impose his dominance.
This also ties into the game's new and fully realized Conquest mode. No longer a mere tutorial like it was in Deadly Alliance, Conquest in this game is a full-on RPG mode that has players traveling the realms as Shujinko, who is tasked by an emissary of the Elder Gods named Damashi to collect the 6 pieces of the Kami Dogu, artifacts that contain the essence of each realm that wield destructive power when gathered together. So yeah, they're basically just the Infinity Stones. It is revealed at the end of Conquest mode though, spoiler alert for a decade-old game, that Damashi is actually Onaga in disguise, who tricked Shujinko into wasting his entire life gathering the Kami Dogu for him, hence the game's title. Nearly every character in the series makes at least a cameo appearance in Conquest mode. The game also features several new minigames, including Puzzle Combat, MK's version of Capcom's Puzzle Fighter series, and Chess Combat, which is exactly what it sounds like. Deception was also the first game in the series to feature an online mode. Not much is known about it, but if it was anything like other PS2 and Xbox era online fighting game modes, I'm sure it was terrible. Also returning is the Crypt, this time with only about 400 coffins, but they are easier to open and get rid of the filler coffins that contained either nothing or references to the other coffins like in the previous game. While the fatalities in Deception still aren't great, they are better than they were in Deadly Alliance, and each character has at least 2 fatalities this time around. Another new move exclusive to Deception is Harakiri. A harakiri, named after the ancient samurai tradition of ritual suicide, also known as seppuku, is when a character will kill themselves at the finish him or her screen in an over-the-top fashion to prevent the opponent from doing a fatality. But only if you can perform the harakiri command before your opponent performs their fatality command, denying your opponent the opportunity to end the match on their terms. Instant death traps were also added to each stage in an attempt to always give matches a sense of tension, even if one player is dominating another. but it ends up just being cheap and frustrating. Stages were also highly interactive in Deception, with many featuring multiple levels and breakable boundaries in addition to the aforementioned death traps. Wall splats also did not return from Deadly Alliance. The new characters introduced in Deception include Ashra, Dairo, Darius, Havoc, Hotaru, Kira, Cobra, Onaga, and Shujinko. All these characters are total losers, with nobody becoming notable enough to appear in another game. Deception also finally reveals the origin of Noob Saibot, where players finally discover that his actual identity is Bi-Han, the original Sub-Zero and brother to the new Sub-Zero who was killed by Scorpion in the first Mortal Kombat.
Probably have shown some degree of pride. But as Raiden had revealed during the ordeal with Shinnok's amulet, his soul had been tainted when he died at the hand of Scorpion. Noob Saibot, the original Sub-Zero, had descended into the Netherrealm free from compassion. He ordered Smoke to assist him in slaying his brother, his first act as ruler of the Netherrealm.
On the gameplay side of things, Deception introduces a combo breaker system, which lets players interrupt combos up to 3 times per match, which would form the basis for the breaker system used in all current Mortal Kombat and Injustice games. This was a welcome addition to Deception to avoid the long, uninterruptible combats in Deadly Alliance, and combos in general in Deception tended to be shorter as well. Characters are also more unique than they were in Deadly Alliance, with more specialized throws, win poses, etc. In addition, every non-weapon style now contains the classic uppercut, which was not common across the board in Deadly Alliance. Deception received rave reviews and sold even more than Deadly Alliance, cementing MK's return in the then modern era of gaming. However, this era of MK would soon come to an end as we approach the end of the original timeline. What do I mean by original timeline? You'll find out next time as we continue on to Part 3, Franchise Armageddon. My name is Kevin, and this is Esports Channel. Thanks for watching, and GG.